the best debate camp in the world. Sniffy.
Yes.
Once a long time ago. Wait, someone else introduce themselves like
As you speak. Great. Congratulations to our finalists.
Wait. That's probably a bad idea. Because then there's like prep time. Because like if he goes,
Yeah, don't do that. No. Don't do that.
10 seconds free prep in each speech.
Good point. Should we just go ahead? Okay. Hi, my name's Krish. I debate for Campo. I've been debating for like 5 years now, I think. It's fun. I enjoy it, and I look forward to debating this round.
Ryan?
I'm Ryan. I also debate for Los Altos. MPLA. Small differences. And this is my third year, junior.
Kevin.
My name's Kevin. I'm a senior this year at Los Altos. I go to Campolindo High School. I've been debating for 4 years now, and I believe that we have a great round in store for you guys.
Is everybody ready? Okay, starting my time in 3, 2, 1. We affirm today's resolution. The United States federal government should prohibit non-medical vaccine exemptions for children. We believe because of the word should, there should be a policy around and for like net benefits, these lens of a policymaker. First, some definitions. We see that non-medical vaccine exemptions are when people essentially do not have to take vaccines when there is like no medical condition preventing them from receiving the vaccine. So yeah. Secondly, as a child is a person between birth and puberty. That's the medical definition for what a child is. Yeah.
So can you give us an example of a couple non-medical vaccine exemptions and what you're specifically prohibiting?
Okay, so currently, like California, for example, passed a non-medical vaccine, basically allowing non-medical vaccine exemptions for like personal reasons, and saying that like, oh, if you think you don't want to take a vaccine, then you can do it. That's just one example. Now, their plan is going to be the resolution. The United States federal government will prohibit non-medical vaccine exemptions for children. The solvency, the first that a couple of states have currently implemented non-medical vaccine exemptions, which have been linked to disease increases in those regions. But secondly, is that after the affirmative plan, this would make doctors legally required to like vaccinate people who do not have a medical condition. But third is this also applies to level of like public schools and private schools. They would not be allowed to admit children that have not received vaccinations if they do not have a medical condition. Thus, the advantage is disease. The uniqueness is that people are currently refusing to vaccinate their children right now. That first, according to Vox, vaccine refusals have been rising in many parts of the country. These are like autonomous, like I am refusing to vaccinate my children types of refusals. They've been rising. And secondly, the reason why is because of the anti-vax movement that has been very recently spreading. It's basically based on this like one study that was entirely pseudoscience, which causes a lot of people to not use vaccines anymore. Third is that the Center for Disease Control, they found data on non-medical vaccine exemptions for vaccines, and they found that there was an increase by 19-fold in 2016 alone for people refusing to take vaccines for non-medical reasons. And the second uniqueness argument under this is that this is correlated to an increase in disease outbreaks as well. First is that according to the CDC, there's over 732 cases of measles outbreaks this year, and they're still on the rise. But secondly, is that according to the Washington Post, the reasoning behind all these increase in disease outbreaks is because of the failure to vaccinate that measles was, for example, was nearly eliminated in 2000, but they came back after the anti-vax movement. That was like directly correlated. Now the links. The plan prohibits non-medical vaccine exemptions. First is that we think that vaccinations are going to be very good and very key checking back disease outbreaks. If that wasn't already clear by the unions, but because of science, like we're able to show that like if you like inject someone with like a tiny amount of disease, that causes resistance to it and prevents like infectious outbreaks. But secondly, specifically, is herd resistance, which means that even if there are a few people that are unvaccinated because of actual medical conditions, those are the people that are going to benefit the most because they will have a decreased chance of getting those diseases because everyone else at least is vaccinated. In a world where people are able to not vaccinate themselves for non-medical reasons, that puts people who actually cannot take vaccinations for medical reasons extremely at risk because that like increases the chance of disease, infectious diseases, and causes it to spread. Now, the impacts is that disease outbreaks are really bad for two reasons. First, it increases the chance of infant mortality, and we believe that that's going to be that's going to be extremely bad. First, because it prevents you from actually living your life, but furthermore, it also causes massive psychological suffering for people who are related to the child, because having a child die, sadly, is really bad. But secondly, is productivity, that a lot of people are also going to be put out of school, out of business, which is estimated to cause billions of dollars are lost every year from being incapacitated from disease. You make disease the status quo makes disease outbreaks very, very likely. We solve that. Next, you should be evaluating high probability impacts first. First, we think that evaluating the debate only through magnitude is very, very irresolvable. Ryan and I in prep time, we thought of 17 reasons why we would cause extinction and solve extinction at the same time. Means that sort of mindset is irresolvable. We should be weighing things that are actually happening in the status quo. We isolate that people are not vaccinating themselves in the status quo. Disease outbreaks are a thing right now, and the plan definitively results in that. But secondly, is that these high magnitude impacts always justify putting off proximal impacts of people being infected by disease, which is clearly happening, but that we wouldn't solve that in a world where there's a 1% chance for nuclear war. East Coast people take note on that. Now, on the framing. We believe that FIA is going to be very good and should be something that should be defended in this round. First is activism. That debate is about that debating about policy is key to sounding well-informed and key to starting movements. We see that the skills that debate provides us uniquely gives us the ability to convince people to join our movements and actually influence real-world policy. We see that specifically. We see that specifically key in the vaccination movement. There's a growing number of anti-vaxxers right now. We need to be that means this debate is uniquely important to understand the implications of not vaccinating your children. Means that we should have that sort of education so we can actually influence the real world and convince anti-vaxxers that they're flat out wrong and they're responsible for a lot of disease outbreaks in the status quo. Now, secondly, is that FIA is also key to highlighting the state's failures. That we expose the shortcomings of the state and the status quo, how they're not they're allowing disease outbreaks to occur. We think that highlighting state's failures key to how movements start in the first place. The protests against the Vietnam War happened when we realized the state is massively screwing up in Vietnam or whatever, which was key to protest to actually change the state. We recognize that the state is doing really bad things right now, and we are serious about ways to make it better. We are not saying oh, the state is so amazing. We are simply saying that the state is bad and it can be slightly better in this way. Now, third is we think that debating about policy-making education is uniquely key because we are all privileged to have come all the way from California and be in the finals of TOC. Indicates that we all here in this round have an obligation to actually engage in political structures. We have not studied the political specifically, and we believe that we can start local movements. I think that local policymaking is uniquely going to be key to resisting Trump. That the problematic policies that Trump passes, like the Muslim ban and the trans bathroom bills, those were all resisted through local movements, state level movements, which means that we need to uniquely engage on a local level to check back for Trump overreach. That independently solves an extinction scenario. We believe that when Trump overreaches, it's only a world where Trump overreaches his executive power and causes a diversionary war that causes extinction, which is why we believe that local policymaking is key to check back for that executive overreach from ever going out of hand. Fourth of all is that root cause scenarios also do not exist. Deleuze-Guattari themselves say that events occur proximally. There's no one single explanation for how the world works. Furthermore, root cause logic is reductionist. That frames out alternative ways of being and results violence against the other. Fifth is that the world is empirically getting better, and that's the only reason the world is getting better is because of policies that are backed in science and technology. And that means engaging those types of policies that are backed by science is key to continuing the trend that exists right now. That we're currently the lowest rates of poverty and the lowest rates of conflict due to scientific progress. Means that empirically the world's getting better. We should continue that. Go down.
The order's going to be that sheet. Actually, sorry. One off, that sheet. Second off, case. What is that sheet? Your sheet that you just read on the framework. Okay. And then case just in order. How many sheets do I need? For what? For any of your options. Many.
Hey, wait, hold up. So, one off.
Yeah.
The policy good sheet.
Yeah.
Then another off.
Yeah.
And then case.
Yeah. And that one's a K. Second off is a K.
I just want to disclose the status of the alt right now, so we don't have to do that later.
Depends on the alt, right? Well, I guess the answer to that is that it's unconditional.
It's unconditional?
Yes.
Lovely.
Is everybody ready?
No. I have a trackpad. I can't
Okay.
How's that?
I'm on one. I don't know.
All right.
Alright, we're good.
Okay. Easy interpretation negation, the affirmation must specify what non-medical vaccine treatments are allowed in the status quo in which exemptions are prohibited by the affirmation plan. Once again, the affirmation must specify what non-medicine vaccines are allowed in the status quo in which they are exempted by the affirmation plan and attempted to write the violations that, first of all, they don't tell you what it actually exists in the status quo and which ones are allowed and disallowed. But the second argument is that they literally don't tell you which ones they're banning, whether they're banning all of them or whether they're only banning some non-medical vaccines. The argument here is that the resolution does not say the word all, which means that their lack of parameterization means that there's always MG vagueness, but the first sentence actually MG vagueness probably means that there's grounds at the point at which they can always re-specify exactly which medical vaccines are happening and what, or the issues probably means that there's always a risk of no link grounds for the negation side, which is going to be a reason for referring to question of fairness, but secondarily is resolutionality. We make the argument that all, the fact that the resolution does not say the word all means that non-medical vaccines exemptions to the question of what the affirmation frames, and we say that by them not thinking which exemptions are happening and not saying that they're going to get rid of all of them probably means that they get to have this fat the skew on the side of the affirmation side. At the end of the day, they are always going to be able to result in more confusion. But the third argument, we said the depth of education. We said that at the end of the day, they are not actually allowing us to have a deep understanding of the resolution because they're only saying that we get rid of these non-medical vaccines. They literally define non-medical exemptions as exemptions that are not medical. That is not depth of education. That's not the reason why we're doing parley debate. We said depth of education is uniquely keeping parley allows for a lot of breadth of education. The fourth standard is that of vagueness. We say that the ability for that. Well, actually, I already read that. Sorry, voters. The first part of this is a priori issue because we're indicting the mechanism that they use in the case, which means that if we're able to win the argumentation that they're specifically being problematic and there is a potential risk of them being able to get out of link grant, that's going to be a reason to prefer a question of education. We say that education in terms of depth, resolutionality, and the ability for the MG to get to skew neg offense means that we're losing specific depth of education in this round. Education is key voter because we say that education is going to be very important specifically. But the second voter is going to be that of fairness. We make the argument that the second subpoint under a priori, we say that the ability for them to skew away negative ground and be vague and not be resolutional is probably an issue of fairness. And we said the ontological impacts fairness specifically in this round come first because they question before they interrogate with the state is a question of how they interrogate with the other in this round, which is us not right now. Your affirmation context. They say Fiat causes activism. The first argument we say that this is bad activism. Look at the fact that Ted Cruz did APTA and he became a policymaker, which means that the activism that they talk about is probably problematic. The second argument is time frame. We say that their activism is not able to resolve any question of time frame, which means that if we were able to win the implications of the alternative happen now, we're going to be winning the round. But the third argument is that our case is a form of mindset field where we are imagining the implication of the alternative happening in the status quo probably means that we are a mechanism to allow for this good activism, which means that we solve for activism, but we actually allow for bad good activism because they are Ted Cruz. But the second argument is that Fiat highlights the state's failure. They say, okay, cool. Fiat highlights the state's failure, which means you're probably going to vote neg on the link scenario because they literally said that the state is bad. If we were able to indict the state and we were able to give you a mechanism for us to be able to solve for the affirmation, to solve for the criticism, that is going to outweigh, we're going to be winning. But the next argument we make is ideology before action, which means that at the end of the day, you always have to be able to have an ideology before you take action, or else your action is going to be, your coalitions are going to break because you don't have a mechanism, which means our case comes first. Secondarily, they say the state is bad, we can be better. This is going to be linking to the logic of reformism later on in the K. The third argument they say is that we are all privileged. The first argument is they are making prescriptive statements about myself. Like, they don't know that I was literally lived in India until I was 8, and then he moved to the United States, and I was able to necessarily live this. Which means the argument here is that by them assuming that we are all necessarily privileged in a position of privilege is problematic. But they say local politics. We say that our alt is more local than theirs because it'll make more sense with the alt. But the second argument they say that we say the political. We say that the political has already seated us. Look, the fact that Trump has already been elected. The question is how we orient ourselves to this. But the next argument talk about no root cause. We're not going for root cause argument. Sure. Actually, I'll take it at the end. Okay. The first off is the negative frame where discourse shapes reality and all of their impacts in the round. The A point is that their epistemology is what frames the rest of the argumentation. The K is a prior question to all other forms of offense in the round because we are able to indict their knowledge reduction. We're able to indict the rest of their offense. The B argument is not a question of the state because the state is not in this room. We said that one, Fiat is a loser regime. The government does not actually pass a plan when you vote affirmative. The second argument is that Fiat is bad because it causes disempowered spectatorship where they're able to cheer on news of suffering because it gives it a disadvantage of uniqueness of their case inherency. Look at the fact that they're able to valorize claims of unhealthiness and measles outbreaks as a mechanism to garner the battle, which means that Fiat is specifically bad. But the third argument is that political is already seated us, which means that is a question of how we orient ourselves through this political that currently exists with the C argument, or the third argument is even questions of fairness in education, or dictated by epistemology, which means that we are able to indict any of their epistemology, specifically that's coming from the state. We are able to indict what they even mean by education and fairness. But the fourth argument is that representation of binding, which means that our representation, that's the one is going to be important thesis. The affirmation valorizes the notion of a healthy body as the ideal and perfect state of being, ensuring stable and vital towards the disabled body of those who are threatened with this notion only, but accepting the inevitable decay and imperfection of our slowly dying bodies can be solved. The links. The first thing is idealizing healthy is a U.S. eugenic project to sterilize disabled individuals, native individuals, and individuals in the black body to create a healthier society.
society, which means the discourse of the affirmation to create this healthier society is rooted in the same problematic rhetoric. The second argument is the logic of reformism. This probably makes sense because they are conceding that the state is bad, but they say the state can be better. Is the same logic trying to cure illnesses, always trying to stabilize the system. The aim point we make is profitability. This allows for big pharmaceutical companies access to new markets because there are individuals who are now being forced in order to take these vaccines, which is an argument that they concede, which means that this profitability link turn is the reason why logic of reformism applies to the third argument is vaccine, specifically vaccine proliferation, is the idea of security for the idealized body. We say that the manipulation of these individuals to conform with state action, even though they religiously or epistemologically have their own objections to this action, is probably a unique form of biopolitics, which is problematic. But on the impact sheet, the first impact is no matter life. We say the healthy body normalizes, creates a perfect body that is impossible to achieve. The B argument is that this creates self-hatred because there is no there's never ability to meet the standard because it's an idealized body that can never be met because we are inevitably decaying, which results in ontological violence. The second argument is eugenics. We say that those unfit or for the normative notion of health of the affirmation pushes get outcast, just like the anti-vacciners who are constructed like as radicals by the affirmation case, even though they are epistemologically trying to deny this action that's being done upon them by another body, which probably makes the argument that the affirmation is specifically framing the biopolitics of this round. Not right now. The second argument is this specifically frames as a zero point of modernity, which is the worst thing that can happen because biopolitics posits your identity as a human. Even to beg the semiotics of humanity begs the question of what exists, which means it is worse than death and dehuman because both of those impacts even positive semiotics that is denied by biopolitics, which means it comes first. But the third argument is serial policy failure. It means that even if you ever resolve solving this, there's always going to be another issue to solve because the idealized notion of health can never be met, which means you are always going to be causing the problems that you seek to replicate. The alternative. Vote negative to embrace temporary able-bodiedness to reframe health as an impossible ideal. Vote negative to embrace temporary able-bodiedness to reframe health as an impossible ideal. Also, obviously, interpersonal affirmation, the ace point as normative health discourse, affects people literally in this room, which means the ability to necessarily affirm our negative strategy is a mechanism for us to use the ballot as a tool to break down the healthy body of the state, which means when they talk about localized politics, our case is about as local as it can get, because we are specifically indicting the discourse of the affirmation, which means that we are weighing the discourse of the one NC, but the second argument is our alternative views health and ability is temporary rather than a stagnant, which means we remove the inherent negativity aligned towards disability or illness. But the third argument is that the alternative then is views of a utopian body, which means that we're specifically able to resolve the discourse of the affirmation because we understand the fact that there is no possibility of this happening. But the fourth argument is there is no permutation in the discourse debate. The eighth point is all 7 minutes of the LOC is discourse for the advocacy, which means that if they try to permutate without the necessary justification, that is just a form of co-option. But remember, any link to the criticism is always going to be a disadvantage to the permutation on case. The status quo is solving. On the herd resistance, extend the argument that herd resistance is specifically important. But remember, even the CDC themselves says that the threshold for herd immunity is 83%. The CDC also says that there are only 8% of 8% of children who are not being vaccinated, and only 3% of those 8 are actually not being vaccinated because of personal preferences and not medicinal exceptions, which means the status quo is sufficiently solving for this. According to the CDC, the entire discourse of the affirmation is a mechanism of biopolitics that specifically creates these issues in order to resolve them. The status quo is sufficiently resolving the affirmation case. Their discourse is one that specifically links to the criticism. Text here. What's the order?
Well, I'll let you know when I read the all. Order? Does the judge want the text interp sheet? Sure. You can just pass it around. Holy. Yeah, I know. Like, are you running out of paper?
Should we just repeat it? It seems to solve all.
Well, I mean, as long as it matches what you gave us.
I don't know. Yeah. Oh, Jesus.
You guys just want me to repeat it?
Yeah.
Okay. The app must specify what non-medicinal vaccines are allowed in the status quo and what exemptions are specifically prohibited in the affirmation or in the affirmation plan. So it's what's the order?
Theory, framing sheet. Actually, no, case on top before all that. case on top, framing sheet, our framing sheet, theory, okay.
Wait, what? The case on top.
Case on top, framing sheet, theory, okay.
Order?
In order. Okay, very good. Overview on case severely undercovered. You can probably extend the entirety of the uniqueness that indicates that vaccines are going down in the status quo. Their argument is that herd immunity is going to solve it. Herd immunity solving the status quo is not going to be applied here because they specifically concede the analysis that for herd immunity, vaccines are decreasing in the status quo. The anti-vaxxer is increasing and the anti-vaxxer movement is increasing in the status quo. Indication to why your response is non-unique is that herd resistance solving the status quo is never going to apply. That means you can flow across the impact. This is always going to be worse for the most impoverished communities and the people that are able to get access to like good vaccines because they literally have medical conditions preventing them from getting vaccines. Just means that there's going to be a lot of dead children. That's the conceded impact analysis. That measles outbreaks kills hundreds of thousands of kids if it goes unchecked in vaccines. And if like the anti-vaxxer movement continues at the status quo, we only the affirmative will solve this. Yeah.
What percentage of children?
It doesn't. Okay, I know where you're going. It doesn't matter. The uniqueness indicates that it's going in the wrong direction. Only the affirmative aid will solve. In addition, they might make like it takes too long to solve, or other arguments. It's already going to be really bad. Means that you give us access to the entirety of the case. Give us all the impacts to leverage against the, give us access to leverage the entirety of the case against the alternative. Next, on the framing sheet. First, they say on the field good arguments. First, they say that activism is actually not going to be good because this specifically because of Ted Cruz. However, I think there are a lot of good, more large-scale activism movements that are being caused by debate other than Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz just did AFID, but there are other schools that did like speech and debate in their middle school, such as Stoneman Douglas School. Now they're really well versed on issues such as gun control. Indication that there's local activism that's caused by field. Now, field is going to be really good. They don't defend this unique reason problem because absent this argument, they are ultimately conceding to the local politics arguments. Local politics need to be based on field and be able to check back for Trump in the status quo. Otherwise, result in extinction and other proximal impacts such as belief, such as this or other ableist policy, which is probably what they're going for. Impacts are the case because if you're conceding all this analysis that is happening on the local level, that means that ultimately you are going to cause all the impacts to happen. The ableist impacts, the sexist impacts are probably going to outweigh your case for an additional second argument. How we are like highlighting, and they say that you should vote neg because they are highlighting like the state is bad. Sometimes like some nonsense argument. However, we are specifically contextualizing into this round. We are highlighting how the state is failing us in this round. They are not letting us use acts. How they are like preventing making a bunch of people like unimmune because like they're letting people get away with not vaccinating their children. We are telling you that in the context of this round, the context of the state failing in this instance, we using field are able to uniquely get in a position of power to liberate this specific instance of the state failing. The third argument is how the ideology is good. If this is fundamentally false because bad ideology still result in good policies. I think the emancipation proclamation is a good word of this. They can have really bad ideologies like I'm going to use the slaves to buy labor now, but the emancipation proclamation itself was still a good policy because it was still very the hate science and movement for progress. In addition, so like you can probably in addition like our entire like PMC is an ideological advocacy for the state saying no non-medical vaccine exemptions are really bad. Then, yeah.
I said that policymaking education is key to sounding well informed and like.
Yeah, that was my. Yeah, I did that already. Then they say, but then he was probably a student. I said it again. Then they say that we're assuming that the privilege first, no impact scenarios to this assumption, but in addition to the second argument, they're conceding the analysis as to how we traveled all the way out here, which means that we somehow and already binding contract to somehow uphold the educational balance of this debate. In addition, they say that the political has already seated us. However, cross-like the analysis that political is not seating us right now. Stoneman Douglas and local grassroots activism movements are existing in the stats where we are taking back Victoria. Now, this uniquely key extended across the analysis as how William May tells you that this right now is uniquely we need to be solving for a local question. Politics movements should be on being well versed right now, not right now. Sorry, on the interpretation. Never specified in the PMC. Look at the text that I gave you. They never read it in the PMC. It means that we are able to specify now. We are able to specify now, for example, religious exemptions and moral objections. Those exist in the task when we're branding them. The second we mean argument is going to be that we literally did that. They asked a question and William said, "Oh, if I think on an ideological level, we don't have to do this." This is a bullshit theory shown in addition to counter-interpretation. With the affirmative does not have to specify unless the negative asks. We, me, and it's better for competing interpretations and meets all of your standards because if they ask, we do not. We then specify, but we do not have to specify until you ask. This solves for empty vagueness. The competing interpretation it will solve for empty vagueness. And in addition, is probably an addition. Yeah, William right. The affirmative does not have to specify what does not have to specify the things, the anti-vaccines in the status quo or that we solve for until the negative asks. This will resolve your tidy of the LG vagueness because you can still ask, but in addition, it's probably better for education because of time trade-off. We don't have to spend time doing all this analysis unless you specifically ask for me that we're able to create more education. We're able to spend more time discussing the topic at hand. We're probably able to turn your entire depth of education and invest onto the counter-interpretation. Additionally, you say that a little vagueness kills all forms of educational development. However, I think turn it's always going to be more preferable to debate the actual content debate, with small, minute differences other than just spending 3 minutes on the theory shell. Also, their interpretation is just bad. Don't buy it. It never says in PMC. We mean. Then on the framework, circle and highlight this. The affirmative framework is conceded. You evaluate this question, you evaluate this debate through a question of net benefits. They never give you a counter roll the ballot, which means that they are miles behind on the debate already. You should probably drop them on this already because we are outweighing on the probability analysis on the case itself. There are going to be hundreds of thousands of children dying because of measles, because of the affirmative don't pass. No counter roll the ballot means we are always framing about all this question. But then on the framework, they say discourse comes first, discourse takes reality. We are discussing implication as to how we should believe the state should be reformed against this, but the second argument is how the crimes case and pragmatic. Again, try to play the same argument. We are in script of advocacy. But the third argument is how the state is not here. Again, debate spills into policy making. I think we can cross by the Stoneman Douglas activists. Debate is always able to spill into policies. In addition, 70% of policymakers were at some point speech debaters. In addition, they say that Fiat is bad. I've already answered all the reasons why Fiat is actually really, really good. And extend those conceded analysis arguments. That's probably a reason to drop them on the framework alone. On the links. We are not linking into this. They never specify what a healthy body is or what a healthy body is attainable. We are simply telling you that people are currently dying, which we can all say is probably really bad because death is bad, that we are trying to prevent for it. We are trying to simply solve for the death. They are not able to do this, which means that's a no-link argument. But in addition, they say on the thesis level that we should be accepting slowly dying bodies out of kills value life because people are always just doing nothing, accepting the pretty much inevitable death. They never do anything. In addition, causes a bunch of pessimism and ultimately result in these pretty much oppression. The status quo because you're always just embracing it and you're like, everyone's gonna die, I don't have to do anything about pressure. Ultimately, this falls the worst on minorities. Probably a reason to not vote for this thesis. On the link level, there is, on the link level, do you want me to go through the links? I'll take the answer. What's the answer?
The state is inevitable.
Oh, also on reformism, the state is inevitable. That we're all trying to form power structures. Just a question of how we interact with it. I think the fiat use in telling that the state is failing us right now because they're not allowing for us to use vaccines as an indication of how we're good for them. On the impacts level. They say that always decaying bodies ultimately result in no value to life. However, the question is that we are trying to solve for the immediate death of a bunch of people, that are going to be exposed to measles and die. This is able to uniquely outweigh this impact on a question of benefits. Huge mistake already counter rule the ballot, but in addition, they uniquely are really worse. The alternative is worse for this because specifically they are always just doing nothing but the babies that do not have autonomy because they literally can't speak and to make their decisions are currently having a bunch of death forced onto them because no one, people religious parents are just saying I am religious. I don't want my child to get vaccinated and vaccinated. And that ultimately forces the death, unforced, that's pretty much forcing the death on the baby itself specifically, yeah.
The state already constructs an ideal.
Oh, also the state already constructs an ideal form of the body, which means your impacts are always going to recreate themselves to the point in which the state is inevitable. In addition, they say that biopolitics is going to be bad. Again, biopolitics is inevitable. It's also going to happen because we're all trying to control how people act and control what other people are doing. They say serial policy fair, no war, and do not give them access to the argument not articulated enough to have an impact. Serial policy fair is able to be checked back through this. In addition, on the alternative, you can probably pardon the entirety of the alternative, do the affirmative, and then then embrace the alternative. I didn't really get a text of that, but you can probably just do that. Embrace the impression of able body. Then they say that they are able to solve for local politics. I think you can cross-apply the local activism arguments. We are able to solve for local politics. They say no quorum because all 7 minutes are discursive advocacy. I think the entirety of the affirmative is also discursive advocacy. So I mean that we are able to say, okay, maybe there's this version of the holy body, but there's also this version, or that version, or that version. First going to be overview, case, procedural, framework sheet,
And then K-pop. So,
Art right now shade. Procedural. Yeah. Okay. Then K-pop at the end. Yeah. Is that right? PR loser means that there's no impact on the firm. It means that you always vote on the epistemological understandings of the affirmation or the negation alternative leads to. Ultimately, go into case. First of all, they say that vaccination will decrease in status quo. However, it's a question of time frame. You can look to the fact that when the plan text is passed, hopefully makes a borough action by the government to say that we are idealizing this and shutting out people in the periphery who have these reasons, personal reasons why I do not take the vaccination, meaning that it's a question of time frame. But also, you can look at the fact that they can see that there's an 83% threshold and that 8% people are already non-vaccinated, 3% are non-medical, meaning that most of the people who are not vaccinated in the first place are medical exempts, meaning that the majority are medical exempts, means that there's always risk of disease in the first place because most of them are medical exempts. But also, you can look to the fact that they make announcements that anti-vax movement means that it's keeping the status quo. However, we can look to the fact that, again, it's really small in the status quo, that you just concede our statistics here, meaning that there's very little risk case solved here on the procedural, just extending across the we-me argument that especially PhD, that means that you cannot garner any offense on the theory shell because there's no violation on framework. First of all, they make the announcement that there's other large-scale movements like gun control. However, first response that you can talk about gun control with an epistemological approach, but also you can look at the fact that you learn about politics in school. Like you can literally a congressperson went to our school to talk about gun control, but you never get to talk about epistemological logic and biopolitical control in school. So it's critical for debate space to learn about it. Also, you can look at the fact that they can see this leads to specifically bad activism because Ted Cruz was able to lead to his very bad policy making. But also, you can see that's a question of time frame. You can look at the fact that this activism idea is hopefully way too slow, and you never actually perpetuate those activism into real world until it's too late. But also, you can see the analysis that critical mindset beyond means that we lead to specifically good activism, meaning that we're always waiting on the activism day. Next framework argument, they make the announcement that it's context of this round. However, we look at the fact that in this round, the voting negative, better in fact statement that we will win here policy. They make the argument that good policy leads to good ideology, like emancipation proclamation. However, the emancipation proclamation was bad policy because it only freed the slaves in the South, where the United States had zero jurisdiction over. So it was a false policy. But also, you can look at the fact that ideology is before action because or else coalitions always break. You have to form a coherent ideology, or else no one will be able to form coalitions with you. Also, they can see the analysis that a lot of reformism happens. It means that there's another link to the criticism. Next argument. They make the announcement there's no impact to prescriptive claims. We specifically isolate that as an ontological impact when he assumes that people like us are privileged. We can never make these prescriptive statements because they assume our ontology, assume our background, which we like analyze the LC is a bad for our ontology. But also they make the analysis that local movements are key. However, we can look back, they can see that our alternative ultimately more local because we're solving people in this debate round in this room right now. But also they make the announcement that political activism is happening right now, so the political didn't see us. However, we look at the fact that political already see us because even though Brown v. Board passed, there's still increasing racism in the status quo, which means that political never is able to check that for the people's needs. But also, we can look at the fact that they're trying to go for some extinction starting on some Trump. Remember, we have to act as regular political agents because when we act in political structure, they always push back at us. Go into framework. First of all, they make some questions that question net benefits because we have no accountable valid, but we don't need accountable valid because our framework specifically says that epistemological frames rest this ground, which means that you'll be valuing epistemology first. Also, you can they make announcements that policy making is critical because 70% people become policymakers. However, cross-my analysis saying that leads to bad policy making. Also, you can look at the fact that specifically, even when 70% people lead to policymakers, when we have learned about epistemological implications behind our actions, that's probably good for policy making, which means that criticism is specifically key for this. But also, they can see that literally, fiat is bad because not only is it illusory, meaning that it has zero access to impacts, but also it's bad because it leads to discarded spectatorship, where you cheer on news suffering for drug neediness. But also, you look at the fact that they can see the argument that various educated or their graphs are binding, mean that they have to hold to the representations that they uphold in the 1AC. Next on links.
They make the argument that they never specify what healthy is. However, remember that's always an excuse that the government makes where they never specify what their policy does, but rather they just use their biological control to enforce laws without explaining them. Also, you can look at the fact that they make the analysis that death is bad. However, we can make the analysis that sure maybe death is bad. However, you never take in the political calculus of the people who are like who don't want to take that vaccination because of religious or personal reasons. You don't say that they account. We make the argument like that leads to always pushing them into periphery. You never take them into consideration. But also, they make the analysis that leads just to pessimism and oppression. However, we can look at the fact that pessimism and oppression is happening status quo because of biological control. I mean that if we're able to resolve this issue, we win on with bigger solvency for oppression. But also, they make the analysis that, or they first then you can extend across all the police scenarios, specifically saying that when you idealize health, saying that these people who don't want vaccinations are specifically bad for our community, that leads to the same logic with eugenics, where we're promoting a quote-unquote healthy society, but rather recruiting people who don't fit within the political calculus. But furthermore, the fact that is another perpetuation of logical reformism, where you're trying to reform the problem, but you never solve the root, the root issue. But we look at the fact that they can see that this leads to probability, where big pharma can always force people to take vaccinations because now they're forced to, which shows that that probability keeps them in power. Yeah.
To say state's inevitable, it doesn't matter because none of us are solving for states. The question of pedagogy.
Yeah, also they make the analysis states inevitable, but we're not solving for the state, we're solving through pedagogy. Remember, all solves is happening when we talk to people in this room, but also we look at the state is actually not inevitable because the Icelandic Commonwealth was ultimately able to lead to anarchism as a state for a long time, which shows how it's not inevitable, as it's only inevitable if we choose to believe and follow the biopolitics of the state. Also, we look at the fact that on links, remember, they can see the fact that vaccination proliferation just leads to conformity to state action, ultimately upholds biopolitics, which is a complete link to the criticism on the impacts. The first argument here specifically is that they make the analysis that there's immediate death of measles. However, we can look at the fact that, remember, it's just a policy in name itself. There's less than 8% of people who are actually using the excuses, which means that the policy is just in name itself and just the use of the state to leverage their policy and leverage to biopolitics. But also, we can look at the fact that they make the state inevitable arguments. Remember, crossed by my state, non-inevitable arguments of also why we're not functioning through the state. That means you extend across all of our impacts here. Specifically, we talk about why we are upholding the value life of people, where we're not affirming an impossibility of the perfect body. Rather, we're saying that these people who are unfit because they don't conform to community ideals shouldn't be pushed into periphery. Rather, consider also they can see the fact that this biopolitical approach puts these people in the 0 point of modernity. Means they can see that's the worst impact of the background because 0 point of modernity means that your existence as a human being that isn't even considered, meaning that's worse than all the impacts that they might even have if y'all wasn't illusory. But also, you look at that, they can see that this leads to ultimately zero policy failure because you're never able to meet this impossible perfect body. Means you always replicate the issues, never solving for the root. The root of the issue. Yeah. Going to the presentation. First of all, you can extend across the perm, preempt that we have in solvency, which we never talked about. That this leads to co-option. Also, to Spanish perm speedily is the footnoting. We can look at the fact that when government action is still using biopolitical control to tell people what is right and what is wrong, in terms of how community ideas should be held, that's still a link to the criticism. That means that there's a link to the criticism. That's the reason of not by the perm, rather just the alternative loan. But let's go to solvency. They made some minute arguments at the end of the speech saying that there are other versions. However, we can look at the fact and know because specifically we're able to decrease the stigma against health when we're able to embrace temporary able-bodiedness. They don't respond to the fact that we're allowed for interpersonal solvency, where we have people in this room. We're the most local solvency. Also, they can see the fact that the alternative view of health is not stagnant, which means that ultimately we lead to actual decreased solvency. Also, they can see the fact that we abandon the views of utopia, which are never achievable. That means we actually need to deal with solvency without replicating our failures.
The order for this LOR is going to be layers and then preempts. Specifically, the order will be the case debate, the support assault arguments. There's going to be a lot of weird cross application, but I'll make sure the side plays pretty well. Then we'll go after case. We'll then go the rest their app framework. Then the rest of the game. Yeah, sure. So I'll be going the case debate, including the status quo solving arguments. Then I'll be going over the framework debate, pretty much, just like the academic framework. Then I'll be going over the rest of the cases. Specifically, links is going to be and then Everybody ready?
Not only do they concede that fiat is illusory, which means there are absolutely no implications of the affirmation plan, which means that the only impacts that are on the that are actually accessible in this round are on the side of the negative. But they also concede the argument that status quo is solving. They completely mishandled this argument because when I asked them the question, how many individuals are actually vaccinated in the status quo, they don't have an answer. Which means at the end of the day, they are conceding the argument that only 8% of individuals are not vaccinated in status quo, and only 3% of those 8 individuals are not vaccinated for non-medicinal exemptions. Which means that at the end of the day, the affirmation is literally using biopolitics as a mechanism to make this into a bigger issue than it actually is, while ignoring the fact that the status quo is solving because of the fact that there is this necessary notion of healthy able-bodiedness that comes from the word of the affirmation. This is indirectly to the criticism, which means that we're probably going to be winning the argumentation that case not only does not apply and cannot be outweighed because they can see the argument that fiat is illusory, which means when you vote for the app, you're not actually saving any lives, but they also can see the argument that their discourse is specifically problematic for individuals in this round who may be facing issues specifically in terms of with issues of able-bodiedness. So let's go into the case debate. Extend the argumentation that the status quo is absolutely solving. The fact of the matter is that the status quo solving means a couple of things. The first argument means that the affirmation of planets is inherent, which means probably no negative presumption. The second thing that means is that the affirmation does not have the impact, which means there's no evidence of the permutation. Also, no link terms on the affirmation side, because remember, the affirmation is literally just talking about the U.S. federal government taking action, whereas we are actually engaged in the critical pedagogy. They're going to try to come up and say that we're going to leverage our discourse of the affirmation side. Remember, their discourse of the affirmation side is one that assumes a able and healthy body, which means that they're always going to be linking, but all the framework level. They say that local activism happens through middle schools, but that doesn't necessarily respond to our Ted Cruz argumentation that says that even though activism is inevitable, it's a question of what kind of activism. And with the critical debate, we are specifically able to have good activism, which is an argument that they concede, which means that both sides garner activism in this round, which means both sides are able to create local activism. The question is, what kind do you want? Ted Cruz or like us? Come on. Anyways, secondarily, even if you don't buy that argument, they can see the argument that mindset fiat is inevitable, which means that as long as we're winning a mechanism of us being able to hypothetically test the implication of our advocacy, we are always going to be able to create the coalition. But secondarily, the argument that they're specifically going to be losing here is the ideology before action. Their only argumentation is that bad ideology can lead to good policy, which is one, probably wrong, secondarily considering the fact that they're using the Emancipation Proclamation, which Kevin makes a very good point, only freed the slaves in the South, while ignoring the fact that other individuals were still in impoverished material conditions, which means the fact of the matter is that they're conceding the ideology prior to action is key. They concede the argument that without ideology before action, you kill coalitions, which means that you are never going to have local activism. This thumps the rest of the arguments that they make on the K and the case because there's no risk of local activism and no risk of any out-of-round solvency if they're not going to be able to create coalitions because they concede that without ideology before action, without the alternative of the criticism, there's never going to be a cohesive action that can create a coalition, which means that they're uniquely losing the framework debate. But on that. They concede the argument that politics succeeded us. They try to cross-apply local activism, but I'm pretty sure I've thumped that in a couple of ways. One, we access local activism, which is a question of critical pedagogy, but secondarily, they concede the argument that politics has already seated us, that Donald Trump is literally president. No matter what you say in this round, he will continue his policies. The argumentation that we make is no matter what happens in this round, the state is inevitable, which means it is our independent perceptions that has a risk of changing, and that's what the K advocates for. So on the K. They say that the alternative results in acceptance of death and pessimism, but they can see the argument that pessimism is the status quo because of biopolitics. The only argument that we're going to be going for here is link 3, because they can see the argumentation that vaccines specifically are a unique form of biopolitics that engage in able-bodiedness, which is uniquely the link to the criticism. They can see the argument that as long as there is a link to the criticism, there is always a disadvantage to the permutation. They do not answer this argument, which means that if they try to go for the permutation in the 1 of AR, they're not going to have a good time. But the argumentation that I'd like you to also extend on the impact level is biopolitics is the 0 point of modernity, which means it literally comes before death and dehumanization, because they can see the argument that even a question of what is death and what is dehumanization is a question of what you are as a human being, a semiotics of your being, but the argumentation that they concede is that biopolitics necessarily shifts that semiotics, because they're conceding the argument that biopolitics on link 3 forces individuals who don't want to take vaccines to take vaccines, which is literally their advocacy, which means that they're probably stealing these individuals of the agency, which is the links in our impact scenario. But also, at the end of the day, we are winning the entirety of the solvency that the discourse state will solve alone. This is only a question of whether you affirm the fact that there is a necessary change that should occur in status quo, or you just want to vote for Ted Cruz. Thank you.
And so the order is going to be framing. That's like the affirmative sheet. And then the K, specifically the links and the alternative, that's what I'm looking for.
So you said, like, app framework?
Yeah.
And then install it. So what's the order?
Okay, so an overview on top, framing, that was a PMC sheet, and then okay, links, alternative.
So is case at bottom?
What?
Is case at the bottom?
I mean, I guess case will be like on the overview, I guess. Doesn't really matter.
Wait, what?
Okay, is everybody ready?
Overview to the round. Fiat is not some abstract force that exists outside this space. It's a tool that specifically gives us the skills we need to start activist movements. This round is a round where the policy-making education we have specifically advocated for is good, which is able to outweigh independently any of the generic response about how, oh, policy-making is so bad and causes us to be Ted Cruz. We are not Ted Cruz in this round. We are saying they should vaccinate your children, and that is a good idea. If we win any risk of that, it means we will be winning the framing today. Now, go to the framing. This is going to be the first layer. No counter-rule about it means you instantly default to net benefits, and furthermore, you should be preferring our specific case over their blanket ideology bad claims or their blanket serial policy claims. This means the case should always come first. I think there's a couple very key arguments to extend on the case that the anti-vaxxer movement exists. It's increasing right now. Disease outbreaks are increasing right now means that only the affirms aim to solve this by passing the knowledge that, like, hey, you should vaccinate your children because otherwise they will die in a measles outbreak. This outweighs because death comes first. Remember, they never actually make an argument how, oh, death is somehow like biopolitical. They don't make that argument, which means death is really bad, and it independently outweighs any of their impacts on decay because value to life is always reversible. There are thousands of children.
So that's the new argument. The argumentation that value to life is necessarily reversible, and that's the reason why that should be valued first.
It's a weighing argument, which
should
the
have
GMR
been
is allowed to
MG. So we had a chance to respond to the specific framing.
The rebuttal is allowed to make weighing arguments. That's not. Rebuttals are allowed to make weighing arguments.
Which is true, but you can't make arguments.
It's not a debate. It's what the judges decide.
Oh, yeah. So, panel. Sorry. Sorry.
Our argument is that just death comes first because it causes psychological suffering. We also win the agency. Don't you dare point of order me here because it came out in the MO. We win agency here, and we independently turn the case impacts because people are being deprived of their agency in a world where they are forced to be, where people with medical conditions are forced to have diseases inflicted upon them. Means we still win agency. Now you can also cross-apply the affirmative.
So the activism argument, specifically the one in which we talk about how our in-round solvency has agency argumentation, was made in the LOC. They conceded out of the MG.
The word agency was never in the LOC. That came out of the MO. That's
I make the explicit term he makes as to how the negative is not first conceding the affirmative, and the affirmative is saying don't let children get diseases that they would not get if people were vaccinated. That's bad.
Sorry, just so much.
No, wait, where was the agency argument in the
specifically in the alt solvency. So you can go to solvency subclaim number 1, where we specifically make the argumentation that normative health discourse affects people in these groups, which makes the most proximal impact because of crushing babies. Also, you got and yeah, that's the rest of the solvency argument. The second argument was valid affirmation value, but that was the argumentation that was made.
Is everybody ready? Resuming time now. The RCF framing also answers any sort of bad epistemology equals bad activism arguments because we have specifically one that our specific form of activism is a good form of activism. They say that ideological impacts come first. However, that just straight up isn't true. Good policy is stable. It's still able to occur even if there's a bad ideology. The negation is fundamentally advocating for no Emancipation Proclamation. You would still rather live in a world where Abraham Lincoln did give the Emancipation Proclamation and still free some amount of slaves. Also, there's a turn to the coalition breaking argument. Ideology first only results in more coalition breaking because everyone has different ideologies that are always weighing for
So, again, the ideology comes before action was straight conceded. The argument that ideology specifically results in rupturing is absolutely new.
Ryan answers ideology first, and the coalition fracturing argument was in the MO. I get a golden turn to this. Okay, is everybody ready?
Not reading new things.
Yeah. Okay. Furthermore, on the privilege argument, there's no impact, which means we just independently outweigh by children dying right now. And the actual thesis of our argument about privilege was that you should be engaging in policies right now. You haven't answered that, which means you are still seating the political. The political straight up did not seat us. We are still able to engage in local activism. Being a policy, engaging in local policy making is key to resisting Trump. That independently outweighs because if we don't just resist Trump, that independently causes extinction, which should still always outweigh on magnitude. They don't do any reason why they don't do any way as to why extinction is bad. Furthermore, we are winning the activism argument. We are not Ted Cruz. We just say vaccinations are good. I'm pretty sure he'd actually disagree with me on that point. Furthermore, there is a structural barrier to any sort of activism gained by the negation. It means only the app can win a we cause activism argument. We specifically tell you that without sounding well-informed and being able to convince other people, your movement is never able to start, which means they don't get local activism. They don't respond to the specific warrants as to how only we create activism because only we maybe will sound well-informed and are able to convince other people. They have just straight up conceded that. Now go to the second layer of debate. That is on the link
level, we do not link. There is only a risk of a perm, and absolutely no offense can be flowed from the criticism. Their links are just straight up bad, and we don't link to them. First is that we never theorize about a healthy body. You can ask yourself, where do we ever do that? We don't say this is what an ideal child should be. We just say that children should maybe be vaccinated, otherwise they'll freaking die, which means that's not a theory about what a healthy body is. Secondly, is that the state is inevitable. That's the reason why we have to do reformism. Means that's not a unique link to the criticism. If the state is inevitable, means the only question of whether a state can be slightly better or not, which means reformism is not a link to the criticism. It's just a reason. It's just like a logical stance to be taken. Now, go to the alternative. They say that the perm gets co-opted, but you can extend it across. The fear of co-option always leads to stagnation of movements because they back away from all structures of powers. This means three things. First,
new argument.
Ryan.
First of all, the co-option argument comes out in Kevin's speech.
That's not true.
Secondly, I think you should stop point of ordering because your MO reached a ton of new arguments.
I bet you like me to stop point of ordering.
Okay.
I don't know. I think it just speaks to.
Is that ready?
Yeah.
First, they never able to solve any movements on any scale, and secondly, the state would inevitably crush you. And third of all, you don't allow power. You allow power structures to straight up oppress the people you're trying to help because you never able to.
Time. The state will crush your movement. Is first of all, absolutely new argumentation, and probably false because our movement isn't even outside. It's here.
Okay.
Right.
Once again, this is all saying why the fear of co-option is bad, and the fear of and the argument that we get co-opted, the perm gets co-opted, is in the ML. He could not have made it in the LO because the perm does not come until the MG.
Okay. The perm independently resolves this because we now work within structure's power to deconstruct the image of a healthy body. They never specify what the alternative does. To know what a healthy body is means the permutation always produces better knowledge because we are able to go in with the state. This is supercharged by the fact that they concede all the state inevitable arguments. The perm looks like this. We solve the app, and we're also saying that we ought to save the kids and then analyze what a healthy body is and then embrace it. They don't specify what the alternative does specifically. We say the perm always does this better. No reason why discourse. The reason we don't get access to a perm. I said things in the PMC. Ryan said things in the MG. You said things maybe, but that's not a reason why our discourses are still mutually exclusive, which means at the end of this debate, I think case comes first. They never read a framework. I wonder why K-debaters usually read a framework. It's because otherwise we get access to our entire affirmative. There's no link to the present theory of healthy body and body only all of the method for network density of this state are reconstructing the notion of a healthy body, which terminally non-uniques any impact. State inevitable, construction of a healthy body inevitable, vote out.